Okay, here it is, 2021 offseason. Deshaun Watson has worked his way into the headlines big time, causing quite a commotion and quite a stir here over the past week and a half. How good is Deshaun Watson? That's something that I think a lot of people have been kind of surprised at, that there would be any question at all about how good he is. And so we're going to talk about that first, and then we'll talk about the trade value, and we'll talk about who should be interested, and then we'll talk about the team that actually ends up with Deshaun Watson, what they should expect moving forward. Having said that, we don't know yet for sure that Houston is moving on. We're pretty sure from all the reports we're getting that Deshaun Watson is ready to move on from Houston. We're just not sure that Houston is ready to move on from Deshaun Watson, which is typical and understandable. But assuming that Houston and Watson eventually part up and split to different ways, which is kind of what we all expect, and it seems to be somewhat of a safe assumption at this point. How good is Deshaun Watson? In my head, he's no worse than a top 8 quarterback, and that's only if you begin to amalgamate his last 3 seasons. If you isolate 2020, which was his best year, he's a top 5 quarterback. Moving ahead, to me, when you look at Deshaun Watson, this is a guy that's going to work his way in the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks very quickly and stay there. He's young. He's only played 4 seasons so far. This is a guy who passes every eye test and every statistical test. When you turn on the film and watch the video, you see how fluid he is. You see how mobile he is. You see how he can move around in the pocket. You see how fast he is at times when he seems to care to be. He can run the football whenever he wants to. He almost doesn't have to. He's so good at throwing it. He can make the deep throw. He can make every throw. His decision making is pretty good. His consistency is outstanding. His accuracy is good. His understanding of the game, his football IQ is good. There is nothing that this guy can't do on a football field from that quarterback position. And so to me, he's absolutely, when you just look at the eye test alone, don't look at anything else for a second, this is absolutely a top 5 quarterback right now, and much more than that moving forward. I think he can move right up into the echelon of MVP conversations over the next 5 to 10 years. Now, statistically, does that hold up? Do the numbers back up what I'm seeing with my eyes? And the answer again is yes. I don't care what statistic you look at. He holds up as a top 5, top 8 quarterback right now. And I can't get him any worse than that. So for folks who want to try to say, well, he's a top 12 quarterback or top 15 quarterback, well, we're not sure how good he is, there shouldn't be any question about how good Deshaun Watson is and how good he's going to be. I don't care if you're looking at QBR or passer rating or touchdown to interception ratio. I don't care if you're looking at how much yardage he's amassed during a season just for pure volume. Looking at yards per attempt, yards per catch, completion percentage, which is a big one. I don't care what number you throw out there, he measures up and he is outstanding at it. He is outstanding in all of these categories. And so statistically or the eye test, either one, he really holds up. And so to my mind, I cannot see any way to argue Deshaun Watson being any worse than a top 8 quarterback. And I encourage and support anybody who wants to try to make him a top 5 quarterback, because I think that's what he is, especially moving forward. Now, the only knock against him really seems to be that he hasn't won a whole lot. You know, you have during his career 2 4-12 seasons, and then you have, I think, a 10-6 season and an 11-5 season in which they get, I think, 1 or 2 playoff wins, but those are only in the wild card rounds and no more than that. And my answer to that is that first season, his rookie year, he shouldn't get any of the blame for that 4-12 season, because he only started 6 games that year, and during those 6 games, he went 3-3. So he produced a 3-3 record as a starter in his rookie year on a 4-12 team. So he should get a ton of credit just for that alone. And oh, by the way, he looked good during his rookie season too. You move ahead to 2018, I forget if that was the 10-6 or the 11-5, but in 2018, they had a pretty good defense that year. It was top 10, top 12, something like that. He had weapons to throw to, but the offensive line was atrocious. It was absolutely terrible. And because of that, you knew once they got to the playoffs, in spite of the fact that they were winning some games in the regular season, you knew they had no shot when they got to the playoffs, even though Watson had a good year and even though they had a good defense. You fast forward to 2019, and it's basically Watson and Hopkins, who dragged that team into the playoffs. I still don't know how they did it. It's just how good those guys were. The offensive line was atrocious in 2019. The defense slipped in 2019 and was actually one of the 5 worst defenses in all of football. It was absolutely terrible. And once again, in spite of the good regular season record and the playoff appearance, you knew once they got there, they had no shot doing anything in the playoffs. And so it was amazing, really, in 2019 that they got the playoffs at all. And I credit Watson with most of that and Hopkins with a large part of that as well. You fast forward to 2020, and this is the 4-12 year, and this is the year that you start to wonder, okay, why didn't they win? Once again, the offensive line was terrible. Laramie Tunsil held his own. He did a good job at the tackle position. The offensive line was a disaster. You took away his favorite wide receiving weapon, and he had a couple of decent guys to throw to. I don't want to say he didn't have anybody to throw to, but his receiving options were very limited and not very high in number either. And the defense was awful. It went from a bad, very bad defense to being one of the 3 worst defenses in all the NFL. It was one of the 3 really, really horrible, almost embarrassing kind of defenses in 2020, and that's why you saw Houston slip to 4-12. So for me, any argument about Watson not being a winner or not producing in the NFL is just a joke. It's an absolute joke. This guy holds up. He's young. You already have him under contract. Yes, it's a huge cap hit. We'll talk about that more in a couple of minutes. But this guy is everything that you want in a quarterback, unless you want Patrick Mahomes, okay? He's not Patrick Mahomes. I don't know that he'll ever get quite to that level, but if that's the worst thing that you can say about your quarterback, then you have one heck of a quarterback there in Deshaun Watson. And so that's where I come out on how good he is. Next question, who should be interested in him? Well, that depends. If you already have a guy that you're happy with for the next 5 to 10 years, and you're comfortable with that guy, then don't bother calling. Of course, Kansas City isn't going to bother calling. And to me, there are about 5 to 10 teams in the NFL who shouldn't be calling. Everybody else in the NFL should be calling Houston daily, if not more than once a day, to get the update and find out what it's going to take to pry Watson out of their hands. And I'm sure it's going to be a hefty price. But everybody in the NFL who doesn't have their set quarterback, the quarterback that they are truly happy with, not just okay with, but truly happy with, every one of those franchises, which to me is at least 20, if not 25 franchises. And I know a couple of towns are going to say, well, wait, we've got a young quarterback. Yeah, you do, but he's not Deshaun Watson. And in a couple of those towns, that quarterback has already reached year 3 or 4 of their contract. So your window there to not pay that quarterback a whole lot of money has shrunk, and you only have a season or 2 left. So if you're not truly happy with that guy being your winning franchise quarterback moving forward for the next 5 to 10 seasons, you should be calling Houston on a daily basis. Furthermore, if you are a franchise that has absolutely struggled to even make the playoffs for 20 or 25 years, you should be banging Houston's door down. You should basically be camped outside of Houston headquarters and calling them multiple times a day. It's kind of like paying the stupid tax, which we all have to pay at some point or another. I don't care who we are or how accomplished we are. We all have to pay the stupid tax at some point. If you are a franchise that has been so inept that you have 1 playoff appearance in 20 years, or 2 in 25 years, or maybe 3 in 25 years, if you were that inept at even getting into the playoffs, you should be banging Houston's door down trying to get this guy, even though he's got a large cap hit and it's going to cost you a lot to get him. I understand that. It's not an easy buy or a quick fix, but you should be calling Houston every day, if not multiple times a day, trying to figure out what the latest is going on and how much it's going to take to get him. So that's who should be calling Houston. Basically, at least 20 teams in the NFL should be calling Houston daily, if not 25, and that's where I come out on that. What's the trade value? That's the big question, okay? How much is it going to cost to get this guy? And the price is going to be obnoxious. You know it's going to be obnoxious. And if I'm going to start with if I'm Houston. If I'm Houston, I'm going to ask a lot. And you know, it can't be one or two first rounders. That's a joke. I'm going to throw knives at you if I'm Houston for offering me something that insulting, one or two first rounders. And if I'm Houston, I know that I can't ask for 6 or 7 first rounders because that's a joke. Nobody's going to do that. They're going to throw knives at me for being so insulting. So it's somewhere between 2 first rounders and 6 first rounders. And where I really come out on that, and I've got it up on the board for what that's worth, is 4 first rounders. That's the number that feels good to me. 5, I only get 5 first rounders if enough teams are willing to pay that 4 first round price and they start bidding up on each other. Then I might even get 5 first rounders. I don't think that's going to happen. That, to me, that's on the outside edge of where a team might go if they're really super desperate and really super in love with Deshaun Watson. The 5 first rounders is tough. That's where it's really, really, really horse-chokingly hard to swallow. 3 first rounders just doesn't feel like enough. If I'm Houston and I'm sitting on a quarterback this good, in spite of the fact that just about all of it is my fault and I've messed up this thing this year and for years with my decision-making processes and how horrible my decisions have been, I don't care. I still know I'm sitting on somebody who is just amazing at playing the most important position in the game. And so I'm not going to give him away for 3 first rounders unless the whole league surprises me and just doesn't offer me anything more. So the price for me settles in right at 4 first rounders. That's kind of the baseline. And the only way I'm going to move off of 4 first rounders is if somebody offers me another legit, young, qualified, proven starting player on somewhat of a reasonable contract, then I would also take that into consideration. But that's the only thing. 4 first rounders is my baseline, and then teams can start to add to that number as they try to outbid each other if they care to. So for me, that's it. It's not 3 first rounders. It's not 3 first rounders and a second. And I don't think anybody right off the bat is going to pay 5 first rounders unless they start outbidding each other. It's 4 first rounders. That's the price. Yes, that's going to eliminate some teams from calling me, but that's okay. I don't have to take as many phone calls if I'm Houston. That kind of cuts out the riffraff. That brings us to the one part of this that I've heard the most, that bothers me the most. Do not call and offer me Sam Darnold with 3 draft picks. Do not call and offer me Tua Tagovailoa and 3 first-round draft picks. We're not going to hodgepodge this thing. Before you think I'm slamming on Darnold and Tua, let me say this. Both of those guys, I think, still have some kind of a hope of at least being a decent quarterback in the NFL if they're healthy and if you put a very good roster around them. I could see them possibly producing at a level good enough to get an 8-8 record or maybe a 9-7 and work their way into the playoffs and maybe under some perfect year getting 1 playoff win. So I'm not saying that these guys don't have a value, but if Houston or any other team for that matter wants Tua or they want Darnold, that's a separate deal. That's something where I call you back later and I offer you a 3 and a 6 or a second-round pick and maybe a 5th-round pick. That's a whole separate deal. This deal here is so big, so epic, so unusual that you're not going to hodgepodge this thing together. It's not going to be 2 first-round picks and a 3rd-round pick, and oh, by the way, here's my quarterback that I don't need anymore. And no, thank you. I'm not interested. I'm absolutely, totally, 100% not interested in your somewhat disappointing quarterback who also has somewhat of an injury history. Darnold, with the NFL level for a couple of seasons, has struggled to get on the field during the past 2 years. Tua, of course, coming out of Alabama, had that major injury that he was dealing with. The answer is no. No, 1,000 times no. And if I'm still not being clear, no. All right? I do not want that quarterback attached to this trade under any circumstances. I understand the thinking. The thinking is, we got our young quarterback. Here's somebody in return who is young, who at least in theory gives you a chance to compete at quarterback. I don't want that. I have absolutely no interest in that, not for this. This guy, Watson, is too good, and more specifically, The availability of a guy this young and this good is unheard of. I read an article, and the first half of the article was great. The ending wasn't great. I don't remember who wrote it, but it was in ESPN, The Ringer. They did a great job accumulating all the NFL trades that might even come close to looking like this. And they went back 50 years. And you know, the RG3 deal was kind of sort of in the same ballpark because a lot of people thought RG3 would be good. So Washington gave up a lot to get him. But Watson is different. We've got 4 years of proven NFL level playing time here. So that's nothing like this really. And then you have to go all the way back to the 60s for the Vikings quarterback, whose name completely escapes me right now. But you have to go all the way back to the 60s to find a quarterback at trade level who was this good in the prime of his career, who's available, and there's just nothing like it. We haven't seen anything like it. And the Peyton Manning thing was similar in that people were offering him money and trying to figure out if he was healthy or not. A quarterback this injury-free, this young, this good, available, under contract, it just never ever happens. And so we're not going to grab a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and figure out something. This is where I offer you something that is completely almost unattainable, and you trot out your very best to try to get that. If I'm Houston, that's it. 4 first rounders, that's the baseline. The only way I'm getting rid of one of those first rounders is if you offer me some guy who is a proven starter in this league and has some kind of a decent contract number to go along with it. So for me, that's the trade value right there. And oh, by the way, Watson's got to approve it too, since he has the no trade clause. But I think Watson will approve a lot of places. I don't think it's necessarily restricted to just one place. And the only reason that it matters, some people say, well, nobody can afford that. Everybody can afford that. Yes, you're dipping into your future draft picks. You're dipping into 22, 23, and 24. I get it. The only reason that the Jets or Miami have an advantage there is because they have so many draft picks in 2021 and in 2022. And in both of the cases, we know for this year, it's a high draft pick. We know it's number 3, and I think number 2 and number 3 overall. So we understand that, yes, you get that high draft pick. Those are the only reason. Anybody can afford the first rounders. The only reason that the Jets or Miami should be considered having an advantage to get Watson has nothing to do, should have nothing to do with Tua or Darnold. I don't want them as part of this trade. It would only be, oh, by the way, I know I can get the number 2 overall pick, or I know I get the number 3 overall pick. I'm really, and if I'm Houston, I really am not interested, and this is important, I'm really not interested in those 4 first-round draft picks. I'm not interested in both of them, 2 of them coming from the 21 draft. You know, the Houston Texans, as of the making of this video, hadn't put on their new coach yet. They don't have a direction yet for the franchise. They don't know what their defense is going to look like. They don't know what their offense is going to look like. They already had their hands full with all of that. The roster analysis. Now, they're going to have to be ready for the NFL draft when it gets here in a few weeks anyway. You don't want to make all of those decisions in a hurry in 2 months of analytics. Now, they'll do 2 months of analytics. They'll figure out the roster and the finances and who they're going to draft. You don't want to make all of those decisions under the gun in a rush. So I'm happy if I do work out a trade with the Jets or Miami. I don't feel obliged to do that. I'm going to talk to anybody who will offer me the 4 first rounders and more. But if it does turn out to be New York and Miami because they have the number 2 or the number 3 overall, I perfectly understand that. I don't necessarily need that second draft pick this year, because I'm already going to have my hands full analyzing everything else that is going on. And I would much rather have your number 2 or number 3 this year. I'd rather have your first round draft picks for 2022 if you're the Jets, and 23. And then if you're Miami, I'd rather have 22, 23, and 24. Okay, so keep that in mind. Anybody can afford this. This idea that only the Jets and only Miami have enough draft capital, and that's the cool trendy word these days, to make a trade here is hogwash. Anybody in the NFL can afford this. It's just a question of, are you willing to pay that price? Are you willing to negate your first round draft picks for the next 4 seasons? And I get it, that's a huge asking price, but anybody can afford that. So The only advantage here with New York and Miami is that they have that high draft pick and they do have extra draft picks over these 2 seasons, which I don't necessarily need in 21. I would like to stagger them out and stagger those draft picks out over the next 2 or 3 seasons if I'm Houston. We'll see what they come up with. Darnold and Tua, don't want them any part of this trade. If I do want to come back later and offer them a 2 or a 3 and put them on the team, that's fine. It will not be part of this trade if I am Houston. Let's talk about the cap space. Should the cap space be a consideration in this trade as you make it as your team out there trying to decide to trade for Watson or not? Should the cap space be a part of this trade? And there's 2 answers to that. First of all is this: Deshaun Watson's cap hit is insanely large. It's obscenely large. That should be a part of your consideration. If you're trying to decide, do I want to move forward for the next 5 seasons with a young quarterback that I get out of the draft, that I pick on my own, and have his rookie contract to work with for the next 5 seasons, then no, I'm not going to trade for Watson. But if you're a team that has struggled to be relevant for decades, and your drafting quarterbacks has not been a success, then this is the way to go. This is your get out of jail free card, is to trade for Watson. The cap number is huge. I talk about this all the time. Teams who have quarterbacks who are making huge money, you do not see those teams make the Super Bowl very often. In fact, not at all. Furthermore, teams that have quarterbacks that are making huge, obscene cap numbers, you don't see them make the AFC or NFC title game hardly ever. Now, we've seen it a couple of times these past 2 years because Aaron Rodgers has worked his way in. And you might even see him in the Super Bowl this year. So it can be done. But the level of difficulty goes way, way, way up when you have a quarterback who's making that much money. I'm not here to tell you that you cannot do it. I think teams eventually will figure it out. They'll break the code. I have my own ideas about how to do that. Nobody in the NFL is doing that right now at the moment who has a good quarterback who is making a lot of money. Eventually teams will figure that out, but it's been very difficult. Teams have not figured out a way to pay a boatload of money to their starting quarterback and still get back to the AFC, NFC title games. They just haven't figured it out. Green Bay is starting to get close here these past 2 seasons. They've started to figure it out. I think other teams will figure it out, but just keep it in mind. If you're trading for Watson, you're also trading for that massively huge cap number. I think it's $25 million this season, but as you move forward for the next 4 seasons, it's $40 million strong every single year. So it's incredibly huge. Yes, you can win. You can win a lot of regular season games. Your playoff success tends to go down, but you can do it, and I think teams can figure out a way. So if the cap number doesn't scare you and you don't want to go the rookie quarterback contract route, Watson is the way to go, and Watson is the guy you should be trying to get. So that's where it comes out on the cap hit thing. Now, how much cap space, and this is something else that bothers me, how much cap space you have in 2021 should mean absolutely nothing as to whether or not you want to trade for Watson. All the deals, it'll be messy for some teams because some teams are tighter than others, and we know the cap number is going to be down this year. All the teams can figure out a way. If they like Watson, and they should, if they need a quarterback, and most NFL teams do, if you're okay with the cap hit itself and going that route and having a good quarterback who's making a boatload of money, if you're okay with all of that, the amount of cap space you have in 2021 should have nothing to do at all in any way with whether or not you make this trade, okay? If you're willing to make the trade, to pay the price, to pay the cap hit, if you're willing to do all of that, then your cap space in 2021 can be figured out. You can cut a couple of guys, you can restructure some people if you need to, and I hate restructuring, but if you're a franchise that has been inept for a very long period of time, you should restructure your way through to getting Watson on the roster. 2021, probably not going to be a great year for you anyway, and then you should figure it out from there. You can quit the restructuring after that because he will already be on the roster and accounted for. So to try to say, well, we don't have enough cap space in 2021 to accommodate that, teams can figure out a way to get him on the roster and then in 2022, 2023, clear up the rest of the finances around it, clean that up, make it more efficient, and get the roster around him built in a way that helps him win, helps you win, and you're not in all kinds of cap space hit. Yes, 21 will be messy if you put Watson on there and you're already tight on cap space, but teams can figure out a way. So cap space, that should not matter for 21. For those of you who are looking at that, it should not matter. That should not be an issue at all. You can find out a way to get him on the roster in 21 and then streamline that in 22, 23, and beyond if you're okay with the $40 million cap hit in the first place. The final thing to ask is this. We've covered trade value. We've covered how good he is. We've covered statistical analysis. We've covered the finances. We've covered all of that. What should a team expect going forward? What should you expect to get from Deshaun Watson himself, and what should you expect as a franchise? Let's be clear. Getting Watson at a $40 million cap hit does not guarantee you a ticket to the Super Bowl or a trip to the AFC or NFC title games every year, or even a trip to the playoffs every year. You still have to do the rest of the work. You still have to do a solid job drafting if you get him with those second and third round draft picks. You still have to do a solid job in free agency. You're not going to be able to spend a whole lot on the top end, of course, but you have to do a solid job of finding good deals, decent starters at decent prices. You still have to do a good job at developing players with your coaching. You still have to do a good job of putting guys in the right place. You still have to do a good job of all of that to have a chance to win. So your work is only just beginning once you get Watson. This is not a ticket to the Super Bowl. It's not even a ticket to the playoffs every year. And that's just the way it is. Because of that large cap hit, it will be difficult, but it can be done. We're watching the Packers do it. The Chiefs will have to figure out a way to do that over the next few seasons. The Seahawks have figured out a way to at least somewhat consistently be in the playoffs and win a lot of games. Although once they get there, they're not winning anything. But the Seahawks have been pretty consistent at least getting into the playoffs here with their large Wilson contract. So it can be done, but it is difficult. So the excitement should be there. But the real thing here is that for the first time ever for some of you guys, and this could be Miami or the Jets or a number of franchises, quite honestly, for the first time in a very, very long time, decades, you have that position figured out. You have that position stocked with somebody who is good. You have a chance to win every game, even though you may not win much in the playoffs the first couple of seasons while you figure it out. You have a puncher's chance in every single game. You know that for the most part, every game you enter, you have the advantage at quarterback, and it's up to other teams to get the advantage somewhere else. It also makes you relevant for the first time in a very long time. It makes you important. And so getting Watson, while it's not a slam dunk, it's not an easy choice to make. I understand if some franchises don't want to go down that route of here's 4 first-round draft picks and now I take on a $40 million cap hit. I understand that. But still, this is a deal worth doing, especially if you're a team, and I cannot say that enough, if you're a team that has been bad and pitiful and pathetic. You know, I cover Washington, Detroit, and the Jets, and I intend to do that during the spring or summer sometime this season again. If you're those 3 franchises, you should be banging the door down. If you're Miami, you should be banging the door down trying to get this guy because it just puts you up on that next level, and it keeps you on that next level for the next decade. And then it's up to you to be smart enough to figure out how to make it work. And that's the code breaker then is that point. All right. I don't know if I've covered everything I want to cover today, but that's good enough for now. Appreciate you watching. I may even come out with another Watson video here in a couple of weeks if I think I need to tweak something or just add more to it. Have a great one. See you next time. Bye.